I am so excited that you all have decided to join us this morning for us to talk about, our transition from packets into digital learning with Seesaw. I know since you guys chose to come, I'm sure you guys are used to all the little people talk. And I know that it seems like there's not too many of us that just focus on primary. So I'm glad, hopefully, especially at the end, if you guys have anything that you want to share, I do have a form for you to fill out at the end so we can all connect with each other and share different things that you would be interested in. So there's also a bit.ly at the bottom with these slides, because later there are some different links of resources that I've been able to find through this time. So we'll get started. So my name is Hannah Teal, and I am an instructional technology coordinator for Darlington County School District. I focus K-5, but since this time, I've been focusing more K-2 with Seesaw, because we have Seesaw for schools K-2, and then third grade and up, we use Schoology. So we figured it'd be better for us to split it up, especially because even though we have Seesaw for schools, the usage before this time definitely varied, which I'll talk about a little bit. I also have my Twitter handle on here, so feel free to follow me on Twitter. And then my email address is on here too. And one of the things that we have been talking about throughout all of this as we talk with teachers is progress, not perfection. I'm sure all of you know, nothing has been perfect about this time, but I think that it's been great how people have been able to kind of rise to the occasion, try to do what they can to do what's best for students. So I also have two friends with me, and I have Beth Hall-Calder, and she is a literacy coach at Southside Early Childhood Center, because that's the school that we're going to be focusing on in our district. And then I also have Rachel Marino, who is the coordinating teacher at Southside as well, because they'll just be here to help to talk about the experience that they've had throughout this remote learning experience. A little bit of background about our school district. So we're in Darlington. We have the track Too Tough to Tame. We just had our race here recently. We're very rural. We do have 23 schools, about 10,000 students. We are one-to-one with iPads K-8, and we have MacBooks 912. Now, before this experience, we were only take-home 312, and our take-home just started 3rd through 8th grade this year. So K-2, even though we were one-to-one, they never had any experiences with taking devices home. To start out with, it was an easy decision to make 3rd grade and up about them taking devices home because they had already done it. But it was definitely a journey at the beginning to get K-2 students the option to check out devices. It went from no, we can't check them out, to, well, we'll at least give them the option, because especially since we had the devices, we didn't want that equity issue just to be greater. So the kids that had devices could get the supplemental materials, and then the kids that didn't would just fall more behind. So we decided the best way to start out with was to give them the option to check out devices, and that was based on schools. Now, Southside, who is an early childhood center, so it just has 4K and 5K, they had a majority of their students checked out devices because they pushed that opportunity for their students. So as I know all of you know, it's the access that students have to the internet at home also varies. but we've been talking with a lot of people about the different public places, and also just going to a parking lot at one of our schools to also get access. And we've also talked about some different ways that they could access different materials while they don't have internet, if they could just download it on their devices. So the journey that we're going to discuss today is about how we went from, we rushed to get some paper packets together because we had minimal time. And luckily we had just started having some conversations about the pilot program for like possible e-learning for inclement weather days. Now, this is a lot more than just the inclement weather days e-learning. This is, all day, every day. So we had started to do a little bit of planning, but really hadn't planned it all. So we worked to get paper packets together. We were able to get them the option to check out their devices. And even though we had Seesaw for Schools, it's been an evolution because a lot of our teachers really weren't using it. They had a digital citizenship assignment they had to do at the beginning, but the usage really varied by school. So then once we got people started, then we evolved to see the different ways that we could work to make this experience better for our little learners. So we made some experiences for new learning and feedback. We worked to make sure we met their PD needs, and then we have some ideas for moving forward depending on what kind of experience they will end up having this summer and next year. So some details about those. So a lot of people, whenever I brought up using Seesaw with their students, especially their kindergarten students, they're like, well, we didn't really use it very much in the classroom. So, and Southside was always my example of they weren't really using it either. And the things that they have been able to do has been amazing. So let's look at then and now. So over here, you can see last year, these are just different weeks. Seesaw sends you different reports for the whole school. So last year, it varied by the week, but there was maybe like 27, 42 posts, maybe 150. This is just last year. So then even before January, these were the different posts that they had. So the usage was up a little bit depending on the weeks, but they were maybe averaging like 50-ish posts for the whole school for the whole week. So then now after, we had this remote learning experience, you'll see for March 16th, they had 1,500 new items in a week. And then a couple of weeks late, well, it was maybe a week after that, then they had over 3,000 new items in a week. So whenever, like I said, people say, well, they're too little, they won't be able to figure out how to do that because we really haven't had a chance to do it in the classroom. I like to show them this because those kindergarten students weren't using it and they just rose to the occasion and started posting the different things that they were learning. So this was our beginning, was getting started with Seesaw, and what we really focused on was the power of pictures and videos. And luckily with home learning codes, I know that not all districts are one-to-one with devices, but no matter what type of device they have, whether it's a cell phone, they can use home learning codes to take pictures and videos, and that could just be used for a smartphone. So even if you still just have to have the paper part, then they can still just take pictures and videos. So to start out with, we also had a lot of discussions about not just giving like worksheets. You might have a couple of worksheet type of activities, but we were trying to, especially for kindergarten, the importance of them actually trying to play and do physical things. So you'll see it has like do 10 jumping jacks. So they're just working on that counting and then uploading it to Seesaw. Or they made a pattern using items in their pantry. So they took videos or pictures and explained the pattern that they had. Those ones were cute. They would have different like cans of different things and like ramen noodles, and they could just use whatever they had in their house. And so these were just some of the different ones, like they could use cereal or different things to do their first and last name. So different ways to actually have them physically use things they had at home, and just take pictures to post it on Seesaw. Because like I've also had to have discussions with some of our schools is I am in no way opposed to paper. Paper is not the thing that I'm opposed to. The thing I'm opposed to is you not having any interaction or opportunities to give feedback to your students for at least 2 weeks. And sometimes they might not even get, if you like mark on the packet, they wouldn't be able to get any of those things. And especially for early childhood does a great job at meeting the needs of individual students, not doing the same thing for everyone. And so to go from doing that in the classroom to all of a sudden everybody having the same exact thing in these packets was kind of like I don't know how this, kind of evolved, because it's not anything like you were used to doing in the classroom. So we started with some of these things that was more just a review, but ways they could use things in their classroom to provide meaningful experiences. But then they actually posted pictures and videos of what they were doing. So that was like the first 2 weeks. And then after that, we had some different professional development opportunities that I'll talk about in a little bit. But Seesaw activities were the next best step for the teachers and the students, because it's more organized. So you can see what students respond to specifically, instead of trying to go through all the journals to see who posted pictures and keeping checklists. It just helps to keep it organized. And then also with activities, you can add supplemental videos or resources to help to start some of that new learning that they were missing because of this type of experience. So these were some of the different, the teachers did a fantastic job at Southside to start to make these activities and work together. Beth or Rachel, do you want to talk any about the way that the teachers work together to start this part of the lessons? Hold on, you're still muted, Beth.
We kind of just, Rachel and I talked a lot in the beginning about how we wanted it to look, and we paired teachers together, and then the teachers just took it and went. They created their own activities and the lessons together as a team, and then they put it on Seesaw and sent it out, and Rachel and I just basically had to check up behind them and make sure that it was standards-based and appropriate.
Oh, Rachel, you're muted. You're still muted. Let me unmute you.
Still muted. There we go.
There you go.
All right. One thing, when we paired them together, we thought about our teachers, and we know the ones that are more tech savvy and the ones that were, not quite there yet. And so we kind of paired those together. So those that weren't as tech savvy could learn from those that were. And so we saw good things with doing that.
Like I said, they've been my example for so many different things. So then you'll see down here at the bottom, if you're not as familiar with Seesaw activities, as students do different things, and I covered up their names, but you can see these students have turned in things. If there's nothing there, that means they haven't turned in anything yet. And then they can also do the draft mode, which is great for working on activities over longer periods of time and giving feedback along the way. So this draft part is something that we ended up talking about later through some of our PD, but it's just a good way for you as a teacher to see, well, I know that you have completed this. And so it's just a way for you to easily give feedback and know who's done stuff and who hasn't without having to search through all of the journals in Seesaw. Beth, there's a question in the chat that asks about the activities being aligned to South Carolina standards. Do you want to talk about that?
So when we first came into e-learning, weeks 1 and 2, it was basically like review work. We really didn't know what we were doing. And the literacy coaches and the CTs were coming together and creating these lessons for the whole district. So once we realized that this was going to be a lot longer than we expected, and individual schools kind of started looking at it, Rachel and I got together and we talked about these kids have got to learn. I mean, they've got to, that we can't just review for the rest of the year. So we started looking at standards, and we talked with our teachers. We did lots of Zoom meetings, and Hannah was involved in a couple of those too. And we really looked at where would you be at this point in the year? And they started researching. They used Seesaw activities that other teachers had created and put on Seesaw that were connected to our standards. I cannot just praise our teachers enough. They really went in and they looked at their standards and they aligned activities to their standards, and the kids were reading and writing and doing math, and science and social studies was integrated. I was really just shocked at what all we were able to achieve.
And going along with that, we started with the pictures and videos, but how Seesaw has a lot of the different creation, like their drawing part, how it's integrated with a lot of different tools. So even if you have like a passage or a student takes a picture of a page in their book, they can record themselves reading it, or they could take a picture of something that they wrote and then they could record themselves trying to read it, because as you know, with kindergarten students, sometimes it's a little bit hard to decipher what they're trying to write. So you being able to get that, and with Seesaw for Schools, it's nice because their journals travel with them each year. So like next year for these 5K students, the first grade teachers will be able to look back and see all of the things that they've done. So they could listen to them read. They could do different things. The next question, I'm going to save that question until the end, just because that's like a whole separate type of thing. But I will get your question in just a little bit. So we went to these Seesaw activities, and like the ladies were talking about, they did such an amazing job working together to make these work. And it was definitely an evolution. So then after they started doing all of these individual activities, and something that we started noticing was, it was good because, depending on how we had them named, they would know what they needed to work for the different days. But if students got behind, then they had if you have a different activity for all of these different things, they might have 7 activities to do each day. And then if they get behind, it could just be an overwhelming thing for them to go to their activity library and see all of the different activities that they had to do. So something that I talked about in one of my Lunch and Learn professional development sessions was how you could combine activities for students to work on throughout the day, so they could save it as drafts until they were finished. So that way they just had, as much as possible, just one thing to work on each day. So this is an example of one of the combined activities that a teacher made. So she combined some of the different ones together, and she had, we talked about having a good checklist for parents and for teachers, but also as a way for students to be able to know when a teacher gave feedback to them or had at least looked at it. Because we started to hear from parents I know it was approved, but my teacher didn't really say anything to me. So was it okay? They just, didn't start to do that until a little bit later. So this checklist, the parents, as they finished the different pages that had the different activities for this, they would put a check on the different boxes. And then I had a session talking about feedback and talked about some of these Bitmoji stickers and ways that you could have it so it would trigger for them to know that you added feedback into there. So if you were to put a check on one of them, but then I had a Bitmoji sticker that has like these big eyes, so that could trigger them to go and look at something, or one of the Bitmoji stickers that has a question mark. So then they would know they had to go back and review something. And with Seesaw, even if they're working on a draft, you can both update the draft, and this is the page that shows up first. So having that in there helps them know, like, my teacher looked at this, or I need to go redo this, or let me go see the different feedback that my teacher gave me. And then you'll see on the left, so this, the checklist was the activity template. And the left, this was the multimedia resource that was connected to the activity for the week. So this has different links, because I'll talk about in a second how they started to do some new learning lessons with Zoom. And these actually had links to the different interactive read alouds that they did with their students for them to go back and look at. So they could click on it and it takes them to an interactive read aloud video to review what the teacher had just done with them. And then we also you could put different, this was just a YouTube video about working out to the letter sounds. So, and what they did to make this was they used a Google Slides presentation and published the link. So it was just a clickable way for them to go through that. I'm gonna stop sharing this part for a second and go into Seesaw just to show you a little bit more, because I know I was talking in theory. So for kindergarten and for Southside in Seesaw. So this is another one of the ones that were put together. So the students would end up clicking on the link. It just takes them to a Google Slides presentation that has different clickable things for students to have. And then the template that they would edit, you see it has this checklist. And then it has like a question that went along with interactive read aloud. It has some of the different ways for them to respond to reading. It has some word work activities. It has a journal entry. Now, they also, some students still had paper involved in this. So especially the students that maybe didn't have access, they could get to like a school parking lot, and then they would just have to upload their pictures to Seesaw to help with this. But they also just made the digital part. That was the last one that they did. So that was just an example of the last one that they did there. So I did mention that in the next thing, so they worked to start to streamline those activities. And at the same time, they also started to have a discussion about the need for new learning instead of only review activities. And the expectation for them was to have live Zoom meetings. And how they just started out with it was on Monday, they had to do an interactive read aloud. And then on Tuesday, they had their math Zoom lesson. And on those days, those were the main things that they had to do. And then for Wednesday and Thursday, they had activities. And then in our district, we had Friday as kind of like a flex day where they also did related arts. It was kind of a catch-up day. We called it an R-cubed day. Rachel and Beth, do you want to talk a little bit about this part with Zoom?
Go on, Rachel.
Okay. Well, just as Hannah said, we felt like we needed more direct instruction, and we needed to start off a little bit slow and that's why we chose the interactive read aloud for Monday and the math on Tuesday, so we could hit both the ELA and the math. And Hannah did a Zoom PD with our teachers to kind of get them started, and then we were there to support them along the way. But what Beth and I would do is she would visit the interactive read aloud lessons and give feedback, and I would visit the math lessons and give feedback. And we saw so much improvement over the weeks with them doing this. Beth, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just our teachers kind of embraced it. And they didn't want to at first, but they really did come up with some great ideas. Lots of teachers were using, they had taken their interactive read aloud and put it into a Google slide and shared their screen with their students. And so the students were able to pull things and move things in the questioning, and they would retell the story in order and those kinds of things. It really just made it interactive. It made learning fun for the kids. And just the parent feedback on those Zoom lessons have been huge. They've just been so excited about them, and so excited that the kids got excited to see their friends and their teacher, and they missed us as much as we missed them. So, and also the kids got to do an interactive read aloud, not just my teacher sent me a video link of a read aloud, I'm gonna read about it and then write about it. They really got to interact and have those questions from within the text, about the text and beyond the text, is kind of what we used to come up with questioning during that time, and questioning during all of our interactive read alouds. But they were still able to have what they had in their classroom with that time, and then go into Seesaw and do an activity with it. So it really was something that everybody ended up enjoying doing.
Yeah. And like with the math, they were able, I think Beth talked a little bit about it, they would pull up the whiteboard and actually work the examples together. And then they had some virtual manipulatives that they would pull up and work on the problems. And it was just really neat, as well as kind of at the end of the lesson, the teachers would review the Seesaw activity that went with the lesson, and they would model like the first two examples so the students would know what to do when they got to that particular Seesaw lesson. So it connected it with the lesson to the Seesaw activity.
And something too, I think that Southside did a fantastic job with pushing their teachers just enough, but not too much. Everybody in like your mind knows kind of where you want to get to, but how you get there, you have to kind of go through a process of what would be the next best step without overwhelming everyone. And I think that they did a great job with listening to their teachers. And especially since Seesaw was so new to most of them, they had heard about it, but really just hadn't taken that leap yet. So from them just taking on Seesaw the way that they did, and then taking on Zoom also the way that they did, but did it in a way that I think their teachers felt comfortable. So, like I said, we talked about progress, not perfection. Like there are things that, like I'll talk about, that thinking about moving forward, depending on how it looks, what are the next steps? Like what would we really like to see? So it's just, this evolution. And this slide right here is something that I shared with them as well, that they could share this, and it's clickable within Seesaw. So all the students have to do, since like I said, they have iPads, is if they click on that on Monday, whenever it's time, it'll just take them over to Zoom. And then talked about the consistency of the times. So that was just the next thing with that new learning. So then, and this kind of was happening all along, but we had different professional development that was offered at the school level and at the district level to try to make all of this happen. So Rachel and Beth did a fantastic job with meeting the needs of their teachers. And then also at the district level, there are 3 instructional technology coordinators. So I focused with Seesaw K2. We had another instructional technology coordinator that worked 3-8 with Schoology, and then we did 9-12 Schoology person. And so we did lunch and learns that were not mandatory. And we did them from 12 to 1, so it's during lunch. And we did them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we did them, they were repeat sessions. So if you couldn't make it on Tuesday, then you could come to Thursday. And they also really pushed for their teachers to attend them. And we just planned them based on what we were seeing and what we thought good next steps would be. And then also, like, I would do individual school sessions based on what they needed. If they reached out, like I would work with admin teams or just individual teachers if they needed it, just trying to be a support because, you know, especially some of our teachers that are not as tech savvy, even if they came to the lunch and learn, they just felt more comfortable with someone there while they were trying something. So we were able to offer those as well. So like I said, we had these lunch and learns. We ended up doing Tuesday and Thursday with the technology part, and then we convinced our ELA and social studies coordinators and our math and science coordinators to come join the lunch and learn train. So they started doing some on Mondays and Wednesdays as well, just to offer some extra support. So here are some of the different things that I talked about with them. So to start out with, before we even did lunch and learns, some schools reached out to do some getting started with Seesaw, like how you would start to use it, like talked about home learning codes, talked about the different creation tools, the different possibilities of that. And then the first thing for my lunch and learn that I started with was how they could do virtual mini lessons. And I started out with, you know, Zoom was kind of the one that people would run to right away, but also talking about the ways that you could include the virtual mini lessons within Seesaw, and you could record yourself for students to go back and watch later, and ways that you could differentiate and give different students different mini lessons depending on what they needed. So if you were having them work on a certain reading goal, then you could record yourself going through that goal and then, you know, give them something to work on whenever you were completed with it. So that was kind of the start of those virtual mini lessons, how you could share some new learning. And even then it kind of went to this feedback in Seesaw. So we talked about those digital stickers and the checklist, but then also how in Seesaw you can go into students' work and you can add another page and record yourself giving them that individual feedback or a little mini lesson if you saw that they did it wrong. So that way you're giving them feedback that's meaningful for them to work forward with what they were doing. And then this new learning in Seesaw kind of was a review of a lot of the things that I'd been doing from the beginning. So just a way to more talk through how students, some of the different ways they can use new learning. We talked about the Osmo projector app, because a lot of our schools had the Osmo kits, which basically turns your iPad into a document camera. And as long as you have that base, you can use it. And then also just talked about, like I said, how you can add the different things. And we talked about, I didn't put the thing on there, but how they could make choice boards with Seesaw as well. So like research boards or just, you know, normal choice boards, but those clickable resources. So they were able to go research different things, make different videos. And we used the presenting part. I'm gonna pull that one. So this new learning, when this was the actual presentation that I used with them, and talked about how in the multimedia instructions in Seesaw that you were able to make choice boards. You could add YouTube videos. You can add your own videos to YouTube and list them as unlisted, so then people can't just find you, because I know some people are they don't like to show their face like that to people they don't know. But then also with us, since teachers also have MacBooks, they could either record themselves with QuickTime or use screen recording on their iPad and share those different things. And then talked about some different resources with them. But this, like I said, this Osmo projector, if you have any of those Osmo bases, it works really well. So let me present this again. So those were just some of the things at the district level that like I offered based on Seesaw. And then I put a couple of examples with this. And so this was something at the school level that they did to help their teachers. So do you guys want to share about what you did with your teachers?
Well, I think that first week in March, when we got out, Beth and I met that Tuesday, and we were like, oh, wow, we got to come up with something to do, for PD for the teachers. And so together we talked about it, and we came up with curriculum communication, and we just went ahead and sent out one that first week, and then we just continued to do that weekly. We expected our students to do fast forward daily. And so we would put that in there each week, kind of an update of who was doing fast forward and how it was going. And then we would do the Seesaw update. I would do the fast forward and Beth would do the Seesaw. And then I would focus on some websites. Apps or either websites for math and science, and Beth would take the reading. And then if you look down at the bottom, you'll see where we did some PD. I started off with them reading a book, later kind of changed up with some of that when we started doing more of the direct instruction. We did, just mostly observe the lessons and give feedback. But they would post discussion on the PD on Schoology, and we would go in and give them feedback on the discussion. And then, of course, we'd do a quote of the week and a meme of the week, just to kind of put some humor in there. And Beth, did you want to say anything else?
Our professional development, that was the first one. It started, we were continuing our work from the school year, because we only thought we would be out to the end of the month. And then we found out that we were going to be out to the end of the year. And so our professional development really just changed. Our apps and websites changed too. We began giving them things that we would put lunch and learns up there, and we would put, here, the literacy footprints. I cannot tell you, Pioneer Valley Books they've done a wonderful job. If you have not gone in and looked at that, they have a digital library that has leveled books in it, and tons of resources and webinars on how to use those books to do small groups. So we have started looking at that for even our next level, to take this to the next level. So I put that in for several weeks for them to go in and look at. So just we've always got to be thinking how we can take this to the next level, because I keep hearing you keep hearing in the media, this is your life for a while. So we don't know what tomorrow brings or what next year brings. So we want to prepare our teachers as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So these were just a few of the ones that they've shared. And some of I actually have some links to what she was talking about with the Pioneer Valley books. Because it started out with, because Jan Richardson is a big part of Pioneer Valley Books. So they would do actual like guided reading, professional development, all of these different things to help to support teachers. I am kind of bummed that the literacy footprints will no longer be free at the end of June, but I don't know, I'm trying to figure out some ways to try to get some of the resources that we've talked about kind of in my own little space, so that way I can share them with some of the teachers. So those were some of the different communications that they had. So just moving forward, and these aren't, these were just some things that we were kind of thinking about. Obviously, our next step would definitely be doing some more small group instruction. Hopefully we'll, it's hard to tell what this summer and school year is going to look like, but probably most of our actual our times whenever we're with students will probably be more of that individual small group instruction that all K2 teachers are just used to doing all the time. Also, we've talked about how you can have some, instead of doing just activities by the day, you can also have some subject-specific activities over a period of time based on those individual student needs. So even if you give them like a writing notebook, a reading notebook, they can take pictures and upload it all along. You can do up to 20 pages, and then you would have to do another one. So that way you can give feedback based on the individual goals of students. So even with math, just a way for them to kind of work through a unit or to work through the week. That way it's more going across. So instead of doing one per day, they might have one per subject, but they work in those throughout that time, focusing on that draft feature. So like reading conference, you can do it by unit, and even like research. So they could make a research book. Like down here, one of the professional developments that I did was about making those choice words. And this had some different things. They had them choose between them, but also just a way for them to do some of the research that they were used to doing within the classroom by showing the different things that they learned. So they would work on that also throughout an extended period of time. So we're also going to try really hard for whenever we fully figure out what summer reading camp, and we're also going to do like an enrichment camp for the kids that have kind of fallen a little bit more behind, working with those teachers to try to develop some good models of some possibilities for moving forward. And then also try to offer just some things in the summer to help teachers start to think forward of these would be some good activities for us to share with students whenever they do have to be away from us. I mean, hopefully they'll just be able to be with us all the time, but at this point it seems like it's going to be some type of blended something. So try really hard this summer to put some of that together. So in this, and I went a little link crazy because I figured the people that were coming to this would enjoy having this to go back to later. So I have a couple of different things, and because it's been great that people have, posted things that are good resources for this time, but it's a little bit hard to go through them and actually see which ones could be beneficial. So these were all ones that I've just thought through. This Read the World website, Kristen Zimke, who's the author of Amplify, actually came to our district a couple of years ago to work with our K2. That website is just, she's great. And if you haven't ever read the Amplify book, you should. But this website here, and then there's some TED Ed, there's the Khan Academy Kids app. This app, and I know it depends on what kind of devices your students have access to, but even if on like a phone, most people could get to this, but they do have some books that can be read offline. So that's one resource for students that don't have access regularly. The Scholastic Learn at Home, Time for Kids, there's a digital library. I always like to forget about Discus for South Carolina, so I just like to throw that in there because there are some really great resources that they put for Discus. It's just some different, this choice board and response is actually a slides presentation that has some templates that you can use. this Seesaw activity ideas takes you to a folder with, before Seesaw had the activity library they do now, teachers were creative of how to share them. So there's just a whole bunch of activity ideas that are more meaningful, like more graphic organizers, ways to share learning. Because in Seesaw, sometimes you do just see like, it's just a digital worksheet. So trying to push people past that. I know Raz Kids right now is free. I also, that Reading A to Z, if you don't have it, you could do like, I think they do a free 14-day trial. And a lot of the books, the leveled text that they have, you can download as PDFs. So then that's something that could be shared with students for offline access as well, or you could print them out and give them to kids as needed. I would suggest investing in that. I bought it for myself when I was in the classroom because I liked it. And Beth talked about Pioneer Valley Books. So they do also some different professional development about how to do virtual guided reading with actual Jan Richardson. So you get to hear it from her. Then there's just some different things. I'm not going to go through all of them for you. Then also from the Teachers College, there's a Padlet in resources. They have started adding some things that you have to pay for to do them now, but there's also some office hours where they've like shared different things from the Teachers College. Whenever you click on these links, it will trick you into thinking that you need to sign in, but if you just click off of it, you can get to the resources. So until they change that, you can just get on there. Then Heinemann, they were so like, they have like remote, all of these different remote learning tips, different things like with Jennifer Saravallo, just some Lucy Calkins, different things. Like this is like for like the nerd people like me who really likes all of these different professional development things. Actually getting to hear from some of these experts has been just great. So I figured since you guys were coming to something like this, that you would like just to have access to these. So this bit.ly in the bottom actually will take you to this slide deck and you should be able to click through it. So I'm gonna talk about, I know some of the questions in a second, but if you will go to this bit.ly, it'll just give us some of your contact information. And if there's some things that you want us to share with you or you want to chat with us about it, you can just put in there, like there's some questions about what kind of needs or how you want to connect with us. So that way, if like, I know someone asked about if I'd be willing to share those sessions, and yes. So if you just fill out this form and let me know that you're interested in me sharing some of those things, then I can share them with you. And I know Beth and Rachel would be happy to chat with or talk to anybody about some of the things that they're going through. And I know that around the state, there are lots of great resources that have been coming out. I mean, some of how we got started with planning for our initial e-learning may have came from some of the ideas that we got from some other school districts. You know, I feel like in this time, the more we can work together, the better. So if you would please go to that bit.ly and fill that out and let us know how we can connect with you. One of the questions that was asked was about, since we're in a rural area, about families with no internet access. So though we are in a rural area, we did get all of our students to complete some questions whenever they got their devices about if they could connect them to Wi-Fi or not. So it helped us to know who exactly have updated information about who had access and who didn't. So, and to be honest, we actually have a relatively low percentage. It depends on which school, but like it ranges from like 7%. Our worst area is in Lamar, and we have about 20% that don't have access. So we're working on trying to to make some things happen for those students who don't have as much. But we've really been pushing even if you plan it well, to go to the school and sit in the parking lot to upload just the pictures of the packets. For our older students, they used Google Drive assignments in Schoology, where they were able to download the slides presentations for offline access. And then once they went back to internet, it would re-upload. So I did on one of them, hold on, I think I have it. I know, hold on. Because in one of them, so in Seesaw, there are a couple of ways that they could like download some of the things for offline access once they got home. But there is, so one of the, because I know I have a slide on one of these. Because especially like the reading A to Z text, that's something that they can download as well. I think this is it. Yes, we also have an e-learning website that we put some different things for students there. Let me go down because I know it's down here. Okay, so a couple of ways that we have talked about if students don't have internet, the more ways that you can get them to actually download videos and resources either to their camera roll or to their files or their Google Drive on their iPad. Also, just talking to students about, the pictures, and a lot of the creation tools on the iPad actually don't need internet to complete them. So as long as they know what they have to do, they could take a picture, they could use the markup tool, they could take pictures and videos, those offline creation tools. And even the iPad screen recording for students, because they could record their screen and then whenever they get to internet, they could upload it to Seesaw. Or, you could have the parents send you a remind message with some of the resources. If you needed to work with that individual family, then you kind of just make it work depending on what they need. And something that in Seesaw itself, I'm going to go into my activities so you can see an example too. Okay, so I've done a lot of things in this. So a couple of things like this is one of the level A books on Reading A to Z, and something that students could do, and it's a little bit different because I'm on my MacBook and not on my iPad, is if they press these three dots, it gives them the option to save it, and it'll save it to their camera roll. So then they can just flip through the pictures of the book. And so that save part. And so they have to get to internet to actually access it and re-upload. But working with them to get as much as they can onto their device at a time will be helpful. And I think especially moving forward, those might be more of the students that you give some more opportunities to come to the school, to a certain place, to work to download some of the things so they can work at home better. So I definitely suggest finding out who doesn't have access, because we were actually surprised. Like for example, Society Hill, which is one of our like real rural areas, we have a K-8 school that has like just over 100 and something kids, like real small. And they only had 10 children who didn't have access to Wi-Fi to connect their iPad, which I was shocked by, to be honest, because I was like 10 kids. It's still like 7% because it's a small group, but I was surprised that there were only 10 kids in that area. So just trying to find different ways to work with them is kind of something we've been promoting. And I think it'll be easier to help them moving forward because we're able to, it seems like, to be a little bit more flexible with people coming into the school. So I'll put this back up for us. Does anybody, hold on, let me go back to my chat. Yeah, and something too, like I know, like I said, we have iPads, but even with the home learning codes are great with Seesaw because it makes it so they can't see each other's work. They also, like, if they have other classes, like we have our activity teachers, but I've also made some, like a reading recovery class for some students or a resource class that they can toggle between classes. But students, they could just use a cell phone. Like they could log in using the home learning code on a cell phone, and they could take pictures at home, because even a lot of them, if they don't have Wi-Fi, the parent probably has something. So a home learning code, I am not for sure if it's, I don't think it is only for the paid version of it. It is something that Seesaw came out with to help with remote learning. Also, Seesaw has some great resources for teachers. Like they have lots of different training. Okay, so I don't think that it's only for the paid version, but the home learning code is just a code that they use to log into their account. So they could use any device, they could use a cell phone, they could use a computer, they can use any type of device to get onto their account that's already been made for them. Since we pay for it, then you would actually have the, like their classes are created for them. But even on the not paid version, they would just have a home learning code that you would send home. So this goes through, like once they've created an account, you create a class, you add students, and then it tells you about how to get the home learning codes, and then it keeps them logged in using that. So then it's just connected to that child and they can't see each other's work. Especially with, if you're giving specific feedback, you wouldn't want them to see each other's feedback in general. But I don't think it seems like it's for everyone. It was just a better way for them to log in. And it can either be a, like there's a 4, or I think it's an 8 or 12 digit code, or there's an actual QR code. You could print out the page and send it, or you could take a picture of it and send it via like Remind or whatever you use with that. So are there any other questions for us? I know that some of you, wanted us to share some different things. And so we would be happy to share them. Just fill out this form right here at this bit.ly, and then you can let us know what you would like for us to send to you. And even if you want to just, talk through some things. I know a lot of you have some different roles. So if you just need some help or whatever you need, if you can just let us know. We really appreciate you coming and spending an hour with us this morning.